Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Your Favorite X-Men podcast. It's been a while, and it's good to be back. If this is your first ever episode, or if you're returning and want a refresher on what this podcast is, well, the goal here is to sit down with a fellow X-Men fan and talk through their favorite character, why that character resonates with them, and, just to immerse ourselves in a fun, passionate conversation about something we love, which is the X-Men. Today, I am joined by Brian, and thank you so much for joining me. I am very excited to talk about your favorite character. So would you like to introduce who that is to us, and then maybe tell us a little bit about your first encounter with the character and why they stood out to you?
So today we're going to be talking about Glob Herman, our fun little pink guy who just hangs out in the background all the time. I'd say I first saw him in his first appearance, really, when I started my first read-through of X-Men in Grant Morrison's run. I think he shows up right for Xavier's, maybe a little bit before in the background. He just tends to tends to be where he is, for the most part. And wasn't immediately drawn to him because, again, he's just kind of around, but you do see him a lot. It's hard to miss him. He's bright pink, right?
I will say it's a very compelling design for him. He immediately stands out in the background.
Absolutely, yeah. You're gonna see the guy with the skeleton, who's just kind of out for everyone to see, right? But as he's been published more and more over the last 2+ decades, right? You give him a little bit more character here, he pops back up again, he gets a bit more pathos here, and it just becomes kind of emblematic of what I've really grown to enjoy about not only X-Men, but the X-Men comics as a whole, and that is its ability to really highlight these D, E, Z list characters. Not to say that Cloud doesn't deserve to be published more, but he's not the focus, right?
Yeah.
But still gets an ample amount of time to tell a story, and it's a grounded, realistic story surrounded by world-ending threats and species, the brink of extinction and all this. But we still have time for one guy going through stuff and the community that he built around himself to allow him the space to mature into his adulthood and where he is now.
And whenever we do get Glob in the spotlight, it seems like he is consistently used to serve as a narrative vehicle to explore more grounded societal challenges that mutants face. It's very telling with this character, and I think Morrison had said that, the intention behind the design was for him to be non-human passing a mutant. He's a mutant that cannot pass as a human whatsoever. It's an embodiment of the mutant condition that we don't really always see. With the original 5 even, we have Beast, who isn't human passing. I don't know. I don't think anyone would disagree with me there.
Especially after, that's in between the original run and the Claremont period.
Yeah, when he was gray, then blue. I don't know. It's a very cool approach, and like you, I don't know if you mentioned that you started with New X-Men or...
No, so I never really read comics until about halfway through college when I really needed something to distract myself from doing the things I was supposed to be doing. And it wasn't even with the X-Men. I was reading a lot of Image. And from a guy who grew up in the 90s, right, you've seen the show back then. Obviously grew up with all the movies that have come out since then, and of course the Capcom games, right? But especially as I got a little older and the X-Men start to wane in popular culture, they're just kind of they're there, they're kind of cool. I remember them, and then they were gone. But then Marvel came out with that promotion in around 2013. I think this was right when Unlimited was coming out, and they were really trying to promote it, and they were giving away 700 #1 issues. I remember that very clearly. It was just read 700 #1 issues from Marvel, just claim them on their website. And I was why not? And I was scrolling the list, and I was oh, X-Men #1. I remember those guys. Let's read X-Men #1. And I opened it up, and I was okay, I kind of get it, but it feels I feel like I'm missing something. Everything looks like I remember them from the 90s, but I don't really remember. It seems like they've known each other for a while. This seems kind of confusing.
Yeah.
Come to realize, this is not X-Men #1. This is X-Men Volume 2 #1. It was, Mutant Genesis, X-Men Volume 2 #1.
Oh.
Yeah. It was just labeled as X-Men #1 in the huge list. And that got me okay, so where does it actually start? So I go back and I see the 1963, or 63, I want to say, 65, I don't know. The actual one, right? And then start to do a bit more research and realize, so there's X-Men, but there's Uncanny, and then there's this new X-Men that becomes its own thing, but then there's a new X-Men, but it's called Academy X. And several spreadsheets later, and about 12 years of reading, and I'm all the way up to maybe like around the dawn of X era in my reading.
Well, that's awesome. What a fun way to consume the X-Men. And yeah, it can be a very difficult thing coming into the X-Men and there being so many different splintering storylines. And for me, for example, I didn't even start reading X-Men until the pandemic, and it was because, I was consistently picking up omnibuses at the time, but because of the pandemic, there was printing issues, and so there were no new omnibuses coming out for this brief little period.
Yeah.
And one of the only things I didn't have that was still in stock was New X-Men by Grant Morrison, and I love that. I really, really love that. But before that, I guess I didn't care that much about the X-Men because I didn't read any of their stories, and when they showed up as tertiary characters or supporting characters in other stories, I don't know, they just didn't really stand out to me. It'd be like, okay, that was cool, but I'm not going to go read their books. But with New X-Men, once I gave it that shot, I was just so hooked. And that's a perfect segue because that's where Glob first shows up, and I think it's I should have looked it up, but I think it's New X-Men 132.
Yeah, it's like right before Riot at Xavier's, or something similar to that. I want to say that's in like the 130s.
Yeah, and if I've read that run a lot because I really enjoy it. And if I'm recalling right, his characterization in that versus what I've read of him much more recently, maybe in the Krakoa era and beyond, it's radically changed. And I know that's been an intentional choice by the writers, and one that I think is super interesting, giving, Glob's backstory with his very anti-mutant father and anti-mutant upbringing. I don't know if his mom was as explicitly anti-mutant. I do know that there's the moment when she drops him off at Xavier's Institute and says, okay, don't call home, which is very cold.
It's exactly like that, right? Because I think I just read that. It's like Ed Brisson run the New Mutants during Krakoa is when that kind of gets fleshed out a bit. But yeah, in Riot at Xavier's, he's just kind of one of Quentin's lackeys. He's just kind of chip on his shoulder.
He was kind of a bully, wasn't he, even?
He was 100% a bully, thumbing his nose at authority and all that. And, I don't blame him. If you want to go for the very, let's say, metaphorical way that Morrison employs in a lot of his writing, especially in New X-Men, you've got this huge kid, he's bigger than most of his classmates, I believe, in that run, who is both extremely bulky, can't really hide his mutation because he's just bright pink, and also on top of that inability to hide, he's also see-through.
Yeah.
So most of his publication, he's completely naked as well. So not only can he not hide due to size, but he physically everything's showing, and he's not really happy about it. He's looking to get into trouble at every turn, and is just kind of dismissive of any kind of goodwill anywhere near him. I think to kind of put a button on it, it's kind of says a lot that his first really big moment is setting himself on fire. That level of self-hatred is just very blatantly on the page.
Definitely, and I'll say, following the trajectory of Glob's character growth, it is something that brings a bit of a tear to the eye. I mean, obviously there's a lot of metaphors you can superimpose onto it. I mean, for example, it kind of makes me think the whole anti-mutant raised backstory makes me think of people who maybe grew up in really strict religious backgrounds and who turned out gay, and that clashed with an ideology they'd been brought up with their entire life, and just sort of having to come to terms with that idea of oh my god, I am that thing that I'd been conditioned to hate, and I'm now forced to confront these biases that have been ingrained in me, and my perspective now is all askew. And I love that Glob does sort of start as in that positioning of a bully with that warped perspective. I don't know, I feel like him being this giant translucent is he wax, by the way? Is that what he is?
Yeah, it's wax.
Yeah.
His bio wax, I think he calls it at one point.
With his skeleton and brain out, like you said, it's a grotesque thing, so it's also everyone is sort of forced to confront that as well. And when it comes to it, really, it's well, the X-Men are going to accept you. That's what they're there for. And his clash with that, I think, is super interesting. And like you said, the clash with authority in it, and him getting sucked up into Quentin Quire, who I don't know how you feel about Quentin Quire, but that's a character who I know they've done a lot of work with him to get him on the right path and trajectory. But I still cannot get behind Quentin Quire. Something about him is just so frustrating to me.
He's a very take him or leave him kind of character, and I'm more in the leave him camp. But it's got to the point where I've read so much of him now, it's kind of and also Quentin's here, and that's fine. Whatever, I can focus. The nice thing about X-Men is that there are so many of them, you can kind of he is also there, but let's go look at some other people right now.
Yeah, and I will say I think Glob is one of the background mutant characters that seems to. I think writers love him a lot too because he seems to show up fairly often, and he seems to get lines fairly often, and fun little moments like that Kitty Pryde Sebastian Shaw moment. I don't know if you've come across that yet.
Yeah. So it's in. I think it's in the teens of Excalibur. You're talking about she like kicks him out of a window.
Yeah,
he's just kind of out in the back and then just runs off. Yeah,
he's like, "Oh my goodness, Mr. Shaw, are you okay?" And then just walks off. He's like, "Hi, Glob."
I think that is kind of the key. Is that I think it's a little bit after the Morrison run because again, he is just more of a sucked up into the anarchy of the moment. But anytime he's published afterward, before his kind of face turn later in the 2010s, he is a bully, but he's kind of that. The bully who's the butt of the joke. He's like more Bulk and Scully than he is, any kind of threat. So he gets like the joking lines. He's a bit of a dork when he shows up, and that never really leaves the character after Morrison. It's that grotesque image combined with a more approachable comedic voice that I think really endears him to a lot of people. And you just can't get rid of him. He just is around. And it's a testament to, how much people like him.
And I guess what I really like about Glob is, coming from that original standpoint and the character growth of where he is now, and maybe it is just more Krakoa era stuff because they've been able to flesh out some of the backstory there, but I really like that moment where he confesses to magic and talks about his father's abuse and how that shaped his societal rage. I think it does a great job of filling things in and humanizing him, and he just becomes this big sweetie that is juxtaposed by that crazy appearance, which honestly, to me, does look kind of sweet in comic form too. But if you really think about what that looked like in real life in like 3 dimensions, it'd be pretty disconcerting.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. That whole journey that he goes on in more or less the background for most of the 2010s, I think is just really emblematic of one of the core ideas that the X-Men comics really nail over its entire publication almost, and that is this unique aspect of X-Men and the Xavier Institute of just giving literally anyone another chance and another chance and another chance. Like there's the running joke that basically every X-Men villain becomes an X-Man at some point, right? Yes. Magneto and Mystique and Juggernaut and Toad get some heroic moments here and there, That's what I mean by that bad penny, is that he is extremely involved in the riot, right? And then he's just kind of around. He doesn't get decimated. He's still part of the group. He's in the back shots and whatnot. He comes back in Wolverine and the X-Men and is just an entire turd the entire time he's there. To the point where I think even in some of the cutaways to the teacher's lounge, they're like complaining about Glob specifically.
Oh, see, that makes me sad for him.
Just kind of in the background being a bit of a bad egg, so to speak. But the main point is that he is still enrolled, right? They're like, okay, and Glob is also here. We're going to let him try again. And he, predictably at that point, because he's not really wanting to do the work, he flunks out and gets enrolled into the Hellfire School for that one arc that goes through the Wolverine and the X-Men. And he's so bad, again, comedically, because this is that kind of book. The teachers hate him there, too. And when that school blows up, where does he go? He goes back to the Xavier School. They let him back in, re-enroll, give him another chance. And we'll give him another chance and another chance, to the point where I feel like when he really gets his turnaround is probably the story I like the most for Glob, outside of the Brisson stuff, which I think is really good in Krakoa, and that's the Spider-Man and the X-Men, that kind of sequel series after the whole Death of Wolverine arc in around 2014, where they have Spider-Man come in and be a teacher for the class that Storm is having a problem with at that point. Or it just at least another class, then there's a whole subplot about a mole that is not important for Glob's sake, but he's kind of has a heart-to-heart with Rockslide, and Glob, that's kind of where he gets his idea that maybe he should try a little bit harder, because Rockslide is kind of in the same predicament, right? He's monstrous, he's a big hulking guy, but he's getting more opportunity, he's getting trust from the teachers, he's much more ingratiated with the other students, and Glob's like, what gives? Like, why are you getting all this special treatment and I'm not? And Rocks, I really wish I remember what the line was, but he says something to the tune of like, dude, you just gotta try.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to be part of the team, you need to be part of the team.
It really does remind me of, and I know in the original New X-Men there was definitely beats of this that Morrison was trying to intertwine into it, but it does remind me somewhat of how incels approach their ideology, where it just becomes self-defeating. It's like, well, you are just now Ouroborosing yourself. You're destroying your own potential here by thinking you're a failure, thinking you can't be confident, or thinking you're just inherently bad for some reason. And I was going to ask what you thought about the connective tissue between Glob becoming a much better guy than that, because the Glob that I see today in comics is kind of just a chill, laid-back guy who wants to be good and kind to people, which is very wonderful and nice. And, maybe I'm projecting a little bit, but I like that.
No, yeah, it's a very specific turn. And I think that story specifically, it's like 6 issues long, is that fulcrum point where anything pre-Spider-Man and the X-Men, he is that butt of a joke, bully type of character. He has this moment of epiphany during this arc and really tries to pull through and work with the other students in that class. They defeat Sinister at the end of the arc. Spoilers, I guess. It's his first taste of like real success and real like community amongst the other mutants, and from that point forward, throughout the rest of the 2010s, he's chasing that high and like wants to do more and do more and do more and do more with, we'll say, various levels of success.
But to your point, it does feel like he
starts
finds
doing
his
the work.
family.
Yeah, yeah. He starts wanting to do the work. Unfortunately, this is probably the worst time to be an X-Men character, right before Secret Wars, because I feel like once that kicks off, everything just kind of goes right out the window as far as like pacing and plot. When it comes back from Secret Wars is the whole Inhumans versus X-Men period. And
I'm a huge Emma Frost fan, and so I've been told to just completely avoid that story.
It's a little rough. Jeff Lemire's run is what I'm mostly concerned with when it comes to Glob. But Jeff Lemire and Cullen Bunn do their best with what they have, but it's hard to build anything constructive out of 18-ish months of publication and gearing up and then having to hard pivot once everything realizes that how much people don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, even with Lemire's run itself, like you've got about 20 issues, 4 trades, and the trades can be summed up as: the first one is we're building the team, the second one is we're doing an event, the third one is we got to ramp down my story, and the fourth is Inhumans versus X-Men. And like that's all the time he really has. Not the best era. But you can see Glob throughout Extraordinary X-Men, like it's really cute. He's going around and like calling everybody sir and like wanting to be a part of it, and like you see him in the background just trying to help mutants. And at one point, Storm calls him an X-Men, or like addresses the general group as X-Men, and he's like elbowing a Knoll next to him, like, she called me an X-Men, man. This is great.
And see, I don't know necessarily if there's textual evidence to back this up, but I like to think while he was immersed in the school environments, he learned more about the legacy of the X-Men and started to really look up to what the original teams have done and accomplished for mutant kind. And I like him being part of kind of like the next generation that sort of aspires to that, but in his own way. He's not an Omega level mutant, and that's okay.
No. But man, he got that one piece of advice from Rockslide, and he was going to follow it like as his guiding light for the rest of the time that he was able to. Like I said, you can see that all throughout Extraordinary, up until the very end. He gets to a point where he's as ingrained of a student as he is basically anybody else during that period. And he's in a lot more group shots and just kind of milling around with other people, not really being an antagonist anymore. The problem is that, like you said, he's not really an Omega level mutant. And as much as he wants to be an X-Men, he gets roped into a lot of plots where the success rate's a bit middling, right? In that event I mentioned, he gets sucked into the future for a whole year with a Knoll and Ernst and No Girl, and they're just kind of stuck there.
Oh my God.
In the Age of X-Men event, which is kind of like, it's right before Krakoa. It's probably where he gets his last little bit of current characterization. In that environment, for context of the show, it's where Nate Gray comes back and reforms the world, very Age of Apocalypse, to be a world where there are no more humans. It's all mutants, and he's like concocted this revisionist history of how mutants came to be the sole inhabitants of the Earth. And it's very, hush hush, don't talk about the past. This is the future now. Don't worry about the past anymore. Type of behavior, and Glob is, for whatever reason, his like biowax in the series Next Gen makes him remember everything that happened before. Like he just kind of plopped into this new world. Like, why is everyone acting weird? Where it happened to Cyclops and the rest of the original X-Men? I don't recognize anything. This is strange. And him trying to get everyone else on board with it, and ultimately ends up in prison by the end of that. Like, it does not go well at all.
Yeah, I have to say, having seen like Glob pop up here and there, he usually is sort of, I don't want to call him the butt of the joke, but I don't know. He's getting dissed on sometimes, either like literally, rhetorically in the story, or just like as a plot point in the story, you know?
Yeah, he's very, very comic relief.
So something else that I wanted to ask about was that relationship between Glob and Quentin Quire, because I feel like after the Morrison run, I've not really seen those two interact. Do you know if there's any interactions like that where they sort of just get back together and maybe talk a little bit about what happened at Riot at Xavier's or anything like that?
I don't really think so. Quentin is kind of, in story perspective, probably a little too self-centered to really consider that. And I don't really know how much they were actually friends.
I guess it was just the counterculture movement that they were both a part of.
I know they have a couple of conversations throughout Wolverine and the X-Men where they kind of talk as acquaintances and former friends, because they don't really ever hang out very much. He's very much in the... Glob is kind of a background character and not really in Jason Aaron's core unit anymore. So he's spending a lot more time with him being Quentin. He's spending a lot more time with like EDA and Brew and those type of characters.
Well, I will say, he certainly has had his cool heroic moments, even if they've maybe not been like as flashy as some other characters' heroic moments, though. I mean, I'm remembering back, again, in that New Mutants run during the Krakoa era, where I think he goes to that organization that's been doxing mutants, basically, and I think he tells them, like, if you continue doing this, I will come back and kill you, you know? Big
that's the inciting incident for that conversation with Magic.
Oh, right. Yes, yeah. Man, I guess I really, really like that run. I had a lot of great moments for me.
I think it got overshadowed by Hickman when it came out, because I skipped ahead and read some of Dawn of X while I was doing my read through, just because of how exciting it was at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember the less than nice words that I was reading online about anytime a Brisson issue came out as opposed to a Hickman one, because they came out alternating months.
Well, that's kind of funny.
On a reread, I really enjoyed it about as equally as the Hickman stuff.
I was gonna say the same. I really like the Hickman stuff, but when it comes to his New Mutants, I don't think it's like his strongest of the X books that he was writing at the time. It's good, and I really like it, but I mean, to me, like Ayila's run after that is pretty equal to it as well. So.
I haven't gotten that far just yet. I'm right on the cusp of it, but I'm very excited to go see it. The Hickman stuff, especially with New Mutants, I think it was exactly what he wanted it to be, and probably no more.
Having not, gotten too deep into the Krakoa era, I guess I'm really curious because I assume you know that the Krakoa era is over and ended now.
Yeah,
right?
I've had my ear to the ground on that.
I'm just curious where you would like to see writers continue to take Glob's character as a Glob fan, and I think it's also valid if you say, I don't know if I want Glob to be a spotlight character moving forward. I maybe like just every once in a while a little issue that focuses on him or whatnot, or would you like to see him maybe become part of a big team, become a leader in the future, something like that? What's the trajectory you think you'd like to see for Glob?
So it's a bit of a big answer or a big question that's going to have a somewhat nuanced answer, in that I don't feel like I need a whole lot more of Glob. With respect to the entire story that we're trying to tell throughout Marvel Comics going forward, he's not a big character, right? And that's somewhat what I like about him, right? The X-Men line as a whole has so much real estate that one of its main benefits in the Marvel line is that you can tell such a wide range of both big and very small stories, and it just kind of helps color the entirety of the mutant sphere of Marvel all the more, like, with so much more detail than something that has to be spearheaded by maybe a solo book and like part of a team book, right, for an individual character on Avengers, right?
Yeah.
And the nice thing about Glob, which is different than a lot of other more minor characters that I think people have issue with is that Brisson arc in Krakoa really does feel more or less kind of like a period at the end of Glob's sentence. You know, he's had this small journey, this character growth. He seems a lot more at ease with himself as a person and can kind of exist in the sphere of X-Men comics more or less as himself, pop up every now and then to be, you know, to do his thing more or less. Yeah. I know he's in like I think he's in like the current McKay stuff right now, but again, as like a background character, I think he's like a cook.
I was gonna say, yeah, I've read a little bit of the McKay X-Men run, and I think basically every image that I've seen of Glob in there, he's like holding a plate of food or something, just looking mirthful also with it. And I know he can't be super expressive with his face, but the artist still managed to do a wonderful job of showing how expressive he is with all that.
Yeah, he seems happy, and he's gotten an ending that a lot of the students, especially for X-Men, don't really get. And if he can stick around and be a funny character in the background that gets a line or two every couple of issues, super great. If he sunsets into the distance, I still have the whole trajectory that we've already gone on, and I'm satisfied with that. And I think that, again, another thing I know about online discourse with X-Men is that there are so many of these minor, especially student characters, that I feel like if we had a lot more moments like Glob has gotten, where they can get a bit of a, you know, punctuation on their time with the X-Men and let them do another thing, that would be a lot more of a service to these characters, that so they don't have to stick around in perpetuity and let the plot drivers do their thing, and we can get some closure on some of the smaller characters. Like I remember Skids from early X Factor. I think eventually at one point she's gone for a long time, and then they check in on her, and she's like, "Oh, I went to college.
I just got normal education." Yeah.
The more often we get to see characters not have to be X-Men to be in the story is a boon for any book that gets to happen in.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point. And I would say, I guess for the future of Glob, I do love the idea of like putting the punctuation on some small character stories like this, and then just letting them exist sort of as they would in the universe. I hope Glob stays around, and I think what I would like to see of little moments of him in the future, perhaps, is if we do get other, you know, young mutants who, if we're treading storylines that are about misguided mutants who maybe have had their perspective warped or twisted and whatnot, I feel like Glob is a character that's good to just drop those little philosophical musings about his own life, you know, and just be a push, forward momentum for someone else to start their journey and find their own punctuation in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the nature of comics is that you can have that bit of closure, and as long as they're not dead, which, you know, it
has Glob
can
died?
Be. Not that I know of. Not that I know of yet.
I think he's resilient, yeah.
But even then, you know, even in death in comics is nothing.
Sure.
You can always bring them back. Is the end of that sentence.
Yeah. Death in X-Men for sure, right?
Yeah, of course.
For somebody who really wants to get into the character of Glob a little more, I know this is a kind of a weirder one since it's not like you can go pick up Glob issue 1.
Oh, sure.
Where would you probably, you're going to say New X-Men for starters, but where would you recommend that they sort of pick a few stories that they might enjoy for the characterization of Glob?
Yeah, I would say that's kind of a no-brainer. You know, you can obviously you'll need Right at Xavier's if you want his first appearance. Maybe just read all of New X-Men if you haven't. You know, just easy recommendation off the front.
Yeah.
I don't think Glob shows up anymore after that, but it's just a good book. Beyond that, I feel like we've kind of hit the highlights over the course of this conversation, but you can read through Wolverine the X-Men if you want to. Again, he's not a huge character there. He does go to the Hellfire Academy there for a little bit as like his low point. If you want to read that, it's hit or miss. The second recommendation I would say is definitely Spider-Man and the X-Men. That's a big glow up for him personally. It's probably his like most central story that it's pretty good quality, and it's a pretty funny book too. If you've ever seen that clip about Sauron saying, "I don't want to cure cancer, I just want to make dinosaurs or turn people into dinosaurs," that's what
it's from there.
That's the run.
I've always wondered where that specific panel was from. I thought it would be a Spider-Man specific story, but I guess it makes sense it'd be Spider-Man. But it's Sauron after all. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one, number 2, and then I would say either Next Gen, just because that is like him in the center. He is the protagonist of that story. So like Age of X-Men Next Gen is the series, or like we've been talking about, the Brisson run. I think that's like a good beginning, middle, end of Glob's story as a whole.
Yeah, and a pretty short one too, I would say, for anyone who wants to do maybe a quick Glob read. But you should definitely read New X-Men. I second that wholeheartedly. I mean, that's, again, what got me into X-Men, and that run is just phenomenal regardless. I know a lot of people diss on the art of it too. I really like the art. I like everything about that run. Well, that's awesome. And thank you so much for joining me to chat the Wax King Glob today.
Yeah, of course.
Glob
Happy
Herman.
It's a lot of fun.
It definitely was. And thank you everybody for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. Also, leave a like and a comment below, and you all have a great rest of your day.